You're kneeling in snow that creaks like old wood. The cold is not a temperature anymore. It's a pressure, a hand on your back, steadying and warning. Breath feathers out and vanishes. The world is reduced to white, to bark, to the thin metallic note that a rifle bolt makes when it settles into certainty. Somewhere ahead, a road wanders through a forest that pretends to be empty. It isn't. Nothing is empty here. Even silence has a weight. Before you drift off, take a moment to subscribe. Only if stories told in whispers are your kind of thing. Tell us where you're listening from, or which image lingers when the lights go out. You're listening to Echoes of War. Snow falls in slow grammar. Pines hold their sentences. You listen for engines the way you'd listen for thunder at sea. Far off, rolling closer, shape without shape. A thread of sound unspools and winds itself through the trees. Treads, gears, steel complaining in winter's grip. The air tastes like flint. Your fingers, layered in wool and will, learn the trigger's language by touch alone. A shadow loosens from the tree-lean across the road. The shadow has a rhythm. Men moving in grey, the stiff pantomime of fear against orders. A hand rises, points. Something answers in the mechanical case of a machine gun, yet nothing moves here that isn't meant to. You exhale, and the barrel steadies. The snow watches, impartial. Your heartbeat counts the smallest unit of time a person can own. Then, the world widens an inch. Above, light spills in with no warmth. Below, the crusted surface sighs under a boot you were sure you had learned to forget. A thought arrives like a bird landing on a frozen branch. This place should not exist, not like this, not tonight, and not for you. But it does, and you do, and in that braid of certainties a country makes itself again. The pace loosens. You lean back against a drift that remembers the wind that shaped it. The trees are pillars and pews. The forest is a church you didn't choose and cannot leave. Snow whispers against your hood. Metal hums through gloves. In the far distance, a field gun speaks in a dull, slow syllable, and the echo returns as if the land itself were thinking it over. Days like this carry their own calendar. They are dated by wind direction, by the way ice lattices on eyelash and scarf, by the salt in soup when it finally warms your hands, by the smell of pine pitch and wool smoke in a dugout you share with strangers who are less strange every hour. The map is brief. A line of lakes, a line of trenches stitched from logs and frost, a road that is an artery for someone else's body. Years later they will call this a winter of astonishment. They will give it a neat title and argue about numbers while a kettle steams in a quiet kitchen. But the place where you stand is not an argument. It is a fact in white and iron. Men on skis ghost between trees, their coats the color of the snow that carries them. The wind keeps its counsel. The forest does not volunteer more than you ask. Somewhere beyond the birch bark and the breath and the waiting, cities are full of voices. Somewhere a map room clears its throat. Somewhere a general leans over a line and says the word advance in the grammar of inevitability. But inevitabilities have always been vulnerable to weather, to distance, to hunger and the stubborn geometry of a small nation's resolve. The days grow shorter and brighter. The light has edges now. You learn the sound of frost tightening, boards in a bunker cracking a little at dawn, ice singing across a lake like a bow drawn across a giant's violin. You learn the shape of patience. You learn that stillness, properly held, is a form of movement. Nothing dramatic moves. Everything crucial does. It is late autumn turned iron winter, somewhere in the north where maps leave room for sky. A line has been drawn that no one can see and everyone can feel. A line through fir and muskeg, over lakes with names like prayers, into a defense of earth and timber stitched by hands that expected to be elsewhere by now. The wind keeps count. The snow does the rest. Chapter 1. A border of pines and powder. The last quiet maps. Light arrives like a pale confession over the Karelian isthmus. Lakes lie under new glass. Bogs harden into pathways no summer would allow. On a kitchen table that now serves as a staff desk, a map unfolds where breakfast used to be. The penciled lines are hopeful in the way pencil always is. Erasable, revisable, a human answer to the certainty of winter. You can read the questions in each line. Where will they come? Where will we hold? How long can we ask the trees to carry what men cannot? Along the old frontier, farmers stack logs with a carpenter's stubbornness. Trenches begin as ditches and end as rooms. Boards are fitted, straw is shaken out, stovepipes poke up like awkward periscopes. A child's sled becomes a supply sledge, then disappears into the adult business of survival. Boots dry over tin stoves, socks steam like small clouds. The smell is wool and smoke and sap. The air, when it moves, sounds like pages turning in a heavy book. On the roads that will matter, men test skis the way sailors test sails, feeling wind, surface, balance. White smocks are stitched in kitchens, the thread carrying the small talk of a nation. Weather, prices, the arm that still hurts from last summer's work. You listen for trains and hear only the intimate noises of preparation, axes answering trees, saws drawing breath, the soft arithmetic of ration lists. Timber, earth, and intention. Defenses are not declarations. They're sentences carved into ground. The line that will be named after a field marshal is not a wall but an understanding. The right hill to watch, the right swamp to refuse passage, the right lake to become a barrier. Logs stack into parapets with the weight of decision. Wire runs between posts like music that doesn't want to be heard. In the dugout's low light, a pencil writes to a mother, "It is very cold. Do not worry." The sentence is both untrue and necessary. You mark the places where armor will hate to go, narrows between forests, bridges with honest capacities, culverts that can be taught to vanish. On margins you sketch the old footpaths and the new winter routes, across ice that will hold, around islets that will listen. A lantern guttering in a bunker throws a kingdom of shadows against log walls. Each notch and nail becomes a geography of its own. The stove ticks as it cools. The frost waits to return. White ghosts, quiet feet. Night is when the forest misplaces its distance. Men on skis pass at 20 meters and seem like memories. White over white, faces wrapped to the eyes, lashes jeweled with ice. Rifles ride low. The little clink of mess tin against belt is a bright star you learn to hide. Breath is currency. You spend it carefully. The snow gives back only what you ask. No more, no less. Practice is patient. You learn to read tracks like a newspaper. Toe in, toe out, wait, haste. You learn the grammar of exhaust plumes in extreme cold, the way they stand, the way they drift, the way they reveal what the trees tried to keep. A motor coughs far away. Someone chants a cadence under his breath just to name the seconds. Far above, the aurora lifts its curtains and the world glows as if from within. You do not look long. Light like that belongs to things that don't need you. There is a word that lives in the mouth differently here. Sisu. Not roar, not charge, not the noise of banners, but the quiet hinge inside a person that does not break when asked to bend forever. You do not define it. You wear it like wool, like white, like the small knife you keep close without bragging about. The first weight of iron. Dawn shakes white dust from the pines, and the sound you've been waiting to meet finally arrives unhidden. Engines, a growl becoming a sermon. The road ahead holds its breath. Figures in grey uniforms thicken along the verge. The first armor noses forward, unbelieving of winter's limits, believing instead in numbers and steel. You feel the old human astonishment at machines designed to overrule landscape, and the older human reply, landscape is more patient than steel. Positions that were lines on paper now have voices, rifles low and measured, a machine gun stitching and unpicking the same sentence, a mortar cracking open a pocket of air, stuffing it with hot fragments and command. You and the men around you become the kind of stillness that has nothing to do with peace. Through binoculars, the road is a ribbon under boots that don't love it. You note the way officers point, always the same, as if pointing could shorten the distance they secretly fear. When it happens as winter wants it to, not a blaze of cheer, but a series of small, accurate rudenesses to ambition. Tracks skid where saplings were left to become spears. A truck leans into a ditch that was once a stream, then a rut, then a plan. A shell lands in powder and shoves up a white, slow flower. The forest coughs smoke and then inhales it again. A bottle arcs, breaks, and teaches flame to run across a surface it shouldn't love. The crowd of noises does not become music. It remains the hard prose of survival. You do not count victories. You count distances closed, hours endured, matches dry, toes warm, a letter folded and refolded until the fold itself becomes a form of prayer. And when the engines wind down and the forest remembers its manners, what remains is the sound of frost tightening again. Boards, wire, breath, the small purr of a stove in the earth. Night enters early, as if invited. Men on skis pass by, white within white, their shadows long on snow that will keep their secrets until spring. A lantern goes out, and you sit in a darkness that does not frighten you. Somewhere a wolf draws a line through the silence, single, clean, sufficient. The cold deepens by 1 degree. You pull your hood a little closer and lean your back into timber warm from bodies. Above you, the aurora lifts and falls like a curtain between scenes. You close your eyes and see the road, the pines, the disciplined white. The last sound is metal settling. The last thought is simple. Hold. Chapter 2. The Line That Learned to Breathe. Under the same pale sun. The morning light returns thinner each day, as if the sky itself is rationing. It slides between pine trunks, strikes frost, and fractures into 1,000 quiet prisms. You wake beneath a ceiling of logs sweating resin, the smell of it sharp and alive against the cold. Somewhere close, a stove ticks its steady clock of heat. Beyond that, silence. A Finnish silence, not absence, but discipline. Even birds have learned to lower their expectations. You crawl out, stretch, and the snow greets you like a second uniform. Everything you touch hums faintly with cold. Metal cup, rifle, sleeve button. Steam lifts from a pot, a small miracle of motion in a world trying to stop. Men murmur in 2 languages, Finnish and Swedish, sometimes Russian learned from trade, sometimes just the shorthand of hands. In this place, differences dissolve faster than frost. All that remains is intent. You walk the trench line and see the country condensed into gestures. A soldier brushing snow from a telephone wire, another mending a pair of mittens with fishing line. Small repairs for a vast problem. The sky doesn't change color anymore. It simply exists, an idea above the real work. Across the frozen lake, faint columns of smoke rise where the front folds around villages that used to have names. Those names are now coordinates. Houses exist as rumors, barns as maps of char and snow. The world has learned to whisper in topography. The first thrust of fire. When the attack comes, it is not a roar but a punctuation, one long exhale of artillery. Shells arrive like questions no one asked out loud. The forest flinches. Trees shed weight they have carried too long. You press into earth that isn't yours but holds you anyway. The air tastes of metal and birch ash. Through binoculars you see movement, armor again, and infantry trailing behind, breath visible, faces hidden by scarf and order. They advance as though convinced of inevitability. But the forest disagrees. Under the snow lie mines disguised as frost heave. In the ditches, teams crouch with bottles in gloved hands, the simple, fragile physics of defiance. A tank grinds forward, unbothered by small arms fire, its turret sniffing for threat. Then a shape rises from the roadside, white over white, calm as an afterthought. The bottle flies, arcs, kisses armor. A moment later, flame blooms like a sunrise that has lost its patience. Men cheer without shouting. Even celebration must be muffled. The column halts. The sound changes. Less metal, more wind. You realize that resistance, properly measured, is not loud. It's the act of continuing after probability has left. Lotta lines. Far behind, in towns where the front is an echo, women work in quiet choreography. They are called Lotta Svard after a poem no one recites anymore. They mend, cook, drive, signal, nurse. They measure morphine by drop and ration by handful. The barracks smell of disinfectant and bread, of fatigue held together by willpower. They pin letters to the corners of maps, trace routes with fingers, note the ones who will not write back. One writes in her diary, "The cold is heavier than grief." Another answers without seeing the page, "But grief keeps us warm." The ink freezes sometimes. They breathe on it, patient, until words return. Outside, sleighs wait like punctuation marks. Each one knows the way to a hospital tent, a supply dump, a line of graves that has started to look organized. You stand in the doorway and see the dual rhythm of war, men holding the line, women holding the world. Both are endurance set to different tempos. Enemy eyes. On the other side of the same forest, another camp breathes steam into the dawn. Soldiers wrap scarves tighter, curse their boots, curse their orders. They were told it would be simple. Small neighbor, short campaign. They learned otherwise before Christmas. The snow eats their tracks. The pines hide everything worth finding. They march by compass because the landscape refuses to explain itself. A commissar reads an order with the authority of distance. The men listen the way frost listens, without warmth. The engines refuse to start. The oil has turned to stone. They light fires to survive and discover that flames invite artillery. They move again, colder and wiser. A captured map shows the same lakes, the same roads, but theirs are drawn in arrogance, not accuracy. You imagine them looking across this same whiteness, seeing what you see, trees, horizon, silence, and realizing that superiority is a poor insulator. The long dusk. Evening falls sideways in these latitudes. The light doesn't leave so much as forget why it came. Patrols move by instinct, skis whispering on powder. Lanterns are forbidden, cigarettes hidden behind cupped hands. In the distance, the northern lights stir again, green smoke, violet veils. Someone mutters a prayer half in joke, half in faith. A radio crackles low with coded weather reports, the same sentence read 4 different ways. Wind finds every seam in every coat. Yet morale, that fragile architecture, holds. Maybe because the men believe they have already gone as far as fear can chase them. You look up at stars too sharp to name. The front sleeps unevenly. Here a shout, there a cough, somewhere a harmonica trying to remember a tune about summer. and in the spaces between, you hear it again, that slow, creaking sound of frost tightening its claim. When morning comes, the snow will have erased footprints, smoothed battle scars, made the impossible look untouched. You breathe in the cold, and it answers back with the only blessing it knows, survival measured in another sunrise. Chapter 3: Engines in the Snow. The convoy that lost its echo. You hear them before you see them, engines that don't belong in forests. The sound is strange here, mechanical, rhythmic, uncurious about the land it invades. It swells, fades, returns again, a tide of steel in slow motion. Somewhere to the north, the rate road threads through pines like a scar no one meant to reopen. Through binoculars you see them, trucks, tanks, supply sledges, endless grey columns wrapped in exhaust and certainty. The Red Army moving toward a village they can't pronounce. The snow under them is deeper than their plans. They expected distance to surrender. Instead, it multiplies. They expected roads to behave like roads. Instead, the roads breathe, narrow, vanish under drifts that reform overnight. They expected Finland to end where the map said so. It didn't. You crouch behind a fallen pine, skis crossed like a question mark, breath locked to your heartbeat. Around you, others wait, white over white, faces erased by design. 100 meters away, the first truck stalls. Another swerves to avoid it. The convoy ripples with confusion. Then winter itself joins the ambush. Wind rises from nowhere, carrying the powder into blindness. Branches shake loose their weight of snow, dropping curtains between friend and formation. The forest becomes a labyrinth, and somewhere inside it, you strike the match that changes a chapter of history. A single rifle cracks. Then another. The sound doesn't echo. It absorbs. Engines falter, men shout, and the quiet hunters melt back into trees. When the smoke clears, the road is no longer a road, but a graveyard of metal trying to remember motion. The geometry of cold. The temperatures fall below imagination. -40, -45. The air moves like glass. Every breath feels borrowed. The Soviets learn a new language here, the dialect of freezing oil, of rifles that refuse to fire, of bread that can't be cut because it's harder than the spade used to dig graves. You see them from distance through periscope binoculars, men clustered around useless engines, slapping hands, rubbing faces, lighting fires that betray position but by life. Some have wrapped feet in newspaper, hands in torn bedding, thoughts in superstition. You remember a saying, "The forest has two faces, one that hides you and one that keeps you." Here it keeps the defenders. Finnish patrols move in crescents, ghosting between trucks, cutting supply lines, disappearing before retaliation can form. They slice a 100-kilometer column into fragments, each one isolated, confused, and colder by the hour. The land itself becomes an accomplice. Frozen lakes that hold until they don't, pines that groan like ships in storm, auroras too bright to be merciful. You realize that cold is not weather, it's strategy, it's memory preserved in air. Fire in the white distance. When the counterattack comes, it isn't a charge, it's an unfolding. Men on skis drift from the treeline, shadows detached from origin. Bottles arc fire licks at armor seams. The air becomes thick with contradiction, flame against frost, motion against paralysis, silence against the artillery's stutter. A tank collapses into its own smoke, tracks turning once, twice, then still. The crews that escape the wrecks vanish into forests that do not forgive. Someone yells in Russian, the sound torn apart by the wind. You steady your scope on a fuel truck. The shot is clean, the consequence immediate. a pillar of orange blooms upward, feeding on spilled spirit and gasoline. The snow reflects it back like a painting refusing to dry. The attack lasts hours, but memory edits it into seconds. A flash, a scream, the smell of burning wool, the whistle of rounds through furs. Then, silence again. Always the silence, returning like conscience. When the men regroup, they count fewer faces but more certainty. A sergeant remarks quietly, "They brought too much of everything except what they needed." You nod. Winter doesn't punish arrogance. It studies it. Suomussalmi. By New Year's, the battle moves to Suomussalmi itself, a village once known for sawmills and summer markets. Now it's a shape in smoke. The snow glows faintly from embers buried beneath it. Charred beams stick up like ribs from a pale carcass. In the ruins, you find a harmonium frozen mid-note, keys crusted in ice. The church bell is cracked but standing. Around it, the ground is marked by boots that won't thaw until spring. Civilians have fled south, their sledges pulled by thin horses and thinner hope. A grandmother, wrapped in wool, tells you that her home burned quietly. You understand the precision of that word. As you move through the wreckage, you see a soldier painting over old Soviet insignia with soot and spit, erasing one story to make room for another. Reports later will speak of strategy, flanking maneuvers, encirclement. But what you see here is the human arithmetic of endurance. One man replacing another at a sentry post because frostbite moves faster than orders. A medic pouring hot water over a canteen lid so the wounded can drink. A priest cutting his cassock into bandages. In the middle of the square, a flag stiff with ice still moves when wind finds the right angle. That, you think, is what persistence sounds like. The Road of Bones. The Rate Road becomes legend by necessity. Kilometre after kilometre, it winds between lakes and pines, each curve a trap. By the time the Soviet 44th Division tries to retreat, the route has turned against them. From the tree-leans come volleys. Measured, invisible, effective. Each burst of gunfire carves another page in the geography of regret. The columns break, scatter, freeze. You follow their tracks days later. Abandoned artillery, half-buried trucks, sledges still harnessed to horses that no longer move. Letters found in pockets, frozen into unreadable curls of paper. Icons clasped in hands that forgot to let go. A radio operator notes in his diary, "The forest closed around us like a fist." He never sent the message. You stop beside a wrecked field kitchen. The soup inside has frozen into amber glass. A spoon stands upright in it like a marker. Above, the wind keeps playing through the pines, unbothered, melodic. At night, flares drift upward and vanish, like tiny prayers that lose faith before reaching heaven. After the engines fade. When the fighting ends, it doesn't feel like victory, more like the temperature-changing key. You walk through the captured road, boots creaking, rifle slung. Around you, quiet reigns with authority. The smell is smoke, fuel, pine, and something unnamed but permanent. Men begin to dig, not trenches now, but graves. They do it methodically, without ceremony, because the ground is too hard for anything else. Somewhere behind you, a phonograph plays a waltz that doesn't belong here. You listen for a moment, then move on. A commander dictates a report. 100 trucks captured, 20 tanks destroyed, thousands of rifles. The cold remains undefeated. He folds the page carefully, as if afraid of smudging the silence. You look up at the sky. The aurora has returned, faint, tired. For a second it resembles the reflection of all those fires now gone out. You realize that the forest has eaten the war the way snow eats footprints, slowly, thoroughly, without prejudice. And yet, beneath it all, something lingers. A conviction. A sentence without end. The engines are gone. The snow remains. Chapter 4. The Frozen Nation. When the sky forgot its distance. The first bombs fell with a sound that no one in Helsinki recognized. Not thunder, not storm, something stranger, mechanical, deliberate. The sirens tried to imitate urgency, their voices shaking the calm architecture of the city. You stand in the street among others who have not yet learned how to run. The air feels too thin for its own fear. From the harbor to Tullo, windows bloom outward. Glass becomes dust. Dust becomes silence. Somewhere a child laughs, not understanding. Somewhere else, an old man crosses himself. The noise folds in on itself like a wave meeting another wave. When it ends, snow begins to fall again, as if correcting the scene. The flakes drift down through smoke, landing softly on what remains. Someone says quietly, "They missed the Parliament House." Someone else says, "But they won't stop missing forever." And the sky, pale and heavy, pretends to listen. Civilians of the North. The city reorganizes itself around habit and hope. Trams run again within hours. Bakers sweep glass from counters and begin measuring flour. In apartments where windows are gone, blankets are nailed to frames. The light changes, softer, slower, filtered through fabric and determination. At dawn, volunteers patrol roofs with buckets of sand to douse incendiaries before they can learn to spread. Women carry water, bread, telegrams. Men dig shelters in courtyards. Every action feels smaller than the threat, and that is exactly why it matters. You walk through Esplanade Park, benches dusted white, statues wrapped in protective planks. The sea nearby exhales mist. From open cellar doors, the sound of radios seeps out. Weather reports, orders, music half swallowed by static. A voice on air says, "The capital stands." We ask only patience and calm. You can almost hear the effort behind those words, the trembling of a hand just off microphone. In the evenings, blackout curtains turn every apartment into a secret. Families eat by candlelight, their shadows larger than themselves. Someone tells a story about midsummer, about swimming in warm lakes, light that never ends. For a moment, everyone believes the story. Letters and silence. Mail arrives irregularly. Each envelope carries both hope and statistics. A mother unfolds a note that says, "Cold, but all right. Don't worry." She knows the script by heart now. The handwriting itself becomes a kind of prayer. In the post office, the clerks wear gloves with fingertips cut away. The ink freezes if the bottles aren't warmed by lamps. Stacks of letters are sorted by village, by regiment, by rumor. Some are returned unopened, addresses turned obsolete by war. You pick one up from the pile. The envelope smells faintly of smoke and pine. The return name reads only, "Kokko, somewhere near the isthmus." Behind you, a clerk whispers, "It's like sending words into snow. They vanish if they don't land fast enough." The radio reads the names of the fallen every evening. Listeners pause whatever they are doing, stirring soup, mending socks, when a familiar syllable surfaces. Then they continue, slower, quieter. Somewhere a violin plays. It sounds fragile, and that's why it feels true. The map room. In the defense headquarters, the air smells of cigarettes, pencil shavings, and unspoken decisions. Officers stand around a long table under low lamps, tracing front lines with compasses and blunt fingers. Each line represents both geometry and grief. On the wall, a clock ticks without empathy. Outside, snow taps against the glass, reminding them how temporary warmth can be. A young lieutenant adjusts his glasses and says, "They're massing again near Viipuri." Someone else adds, "Let them. The ice will hold our side longer." The conversation stays low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Orders are drafted in tidy handwriting. Names become numbers, and numbers become units, and units become the thin wall between freedom and loss. You stand by the door, unseen, and notice the smallest thing: a mug with frozen coffee at its rim, a pencil bitten nearly in half. Objects absorbing tension so humans don't have to. In the corner of the room, the heater coughs and gives up. No one complains. The silence resumes, punctuated only by the soft rasp of map paper being folded again and again, as though repetition might change its outcome. The Museum of Waiting. Every city at war becomes a museum of waiting. On tram stops, women stand with baskets of potatoes, scarves drawn high, eyes on the sky. They know the sound of engines now, can tell friend from foe by pitch alone. When planes pass without sirens, they count to 60 before breathing again. In hospital corridors, nurses move like ghosts. They whisper instructions, adjust blankets, trade exhaustion like currency. The air smells of antiseptic and snow. Children's drawings hang on the walls. Suns, birds, stick figures holding hands in summer meadows that no longer exist except as memory. You watch a nurse wash her hands until they bleed, then wrap them and continue. Her motion is ritual, not hope. Hope is something postponed until spring. On the harbor, frozen ships sit like fossils. Their decks are white and soundless. Men chip ice from ropes, though no voyage waits. They do it because movement is proof of belief. The city learns to live inside the interval between alarms. The snow that listens. At night, Helsinki looks almost peaceful from above. Blacked-out streets tracing faint geometry, the harbor glimmering like spilled mercury. Snow covers everything, smoothing the edges of war into something that could be mistaken for calm. You walk through the empty streets past statues wearing helmets of snow. The air smells faintly of burnt oil and frost. Somewhere distant, artillery murmurs, too far to fear, too near to forget. You stop by the cathedral. Its steps are buried to the knees in white. A single candle burns on the landing, left by someone who couldn't go inside. The flame flickers in the wind, then steadies, a heartbeat refusing to end. A passing patrol nods to you. No one speaks. Speech feels too expensive in this weather. Your boots leave perfect prints behind you, and you think of how quickly the snow will take them back. Above, the aurora appears again, faint green strokes against indigo. You've begun to think of it not as light, but as memory, the sky remembering fire, but refusing to name it. When dawn returns, it does so reluctantly, grey light seeping through a city that refuses to surrender its silhouette. From the harbor, a horn sounds once, long, low, steady, the kind of sound that says, "We are still here." Chapter 5. The Siege of Viipuri. The Gate to the South. Viipuri, a city of bridges, of markets, of gulls that once argued over bread by the water. Now the harbor is a mirror broken by shellfire. You stand on what used to be cobblestone, though snow has rewritten it into a single unbroken page. Smoke rises from warehouses along the canal. The air is grey, tasting of limestone and oil. Somewhere behind the cathedral, the sound of hammering continues. Not panic, just necessity. Every board nailed across a window is an argument with inevitability. From the ramparts, you can see the lake frozen into a white plain. The horizon looks close enough to touch. The line has moved south, closer every day. Soldiers drag guns across the ice, their silhouettes thin, deliberate, unwavering. They look less like men and more like the continuation of landscape, shapes obeying physics and faith. A lieutenant mutters, "We'll hold until the thaw." You know what that means. Until the earth decides it's time to remember color again. The wall of air and earth. The Mannerheim line. It was never a wall, only an idea built from soil, rock, and hours. Now, what remains of it trembles under constant impact. Artillery walks across it like a blind giant counting steps. Each hit lifts a cloud of powdered frost and earth that drifts down on the shoulders of men who have stopped flinching. Inside a bunker, the air smells of sweat, pine, and gun oil. The walls weep moisture that turns to ice before it reaches the floor. Someone hums softly, a tune with no words, just rhythm. It keeps the heartbeat honest. Messages arrive by field phone. Sector 12 holding. Sector 14, lost, regained, holding again. The repetition becomes comfort. You look at the men, faces chiseled by exhaustion, eyes calm in ways that should not exist. One rubs his wedding ring like a talisman. Another sketches the outline of home on the bunker wall with charcoal. The image smudges almost immediately, but that doesn't matter. The motion itself is proof of memory. Outside, wind funnels down the trench line, dragging snowflakes like sparks from an invisible fire. Every blast outside lands with the same grammar: impact, echo, silence. The silence, somehow, always wins. The air that burned. By mid-February, the bombardment becomes constant. You stop noticing beginnings and ends. The city breathes in dust instead of oxygen. Roofs collapse into attics full of snow. Street signs twist and point nowhere. Bridges split into ribs across the canal. And yet, between barrages, the market still appears. A woman sells bread that tastes of smoke. A boy hauls a sled full of firewood past a crater. Someone has chalked the words, "We are still here," on a wall that barely stands. You walk through this theater of persistence, hearing footsteps as applause for endurance itself. Every sound feels ceremonial. Boots, shovels, coughing. Even fear seems tired of its own echo. Planes arrive at noon, black crosses against a white page. The sirens cry. The people do not. They move toward cellars in orderly lines, the way believers move toward altars. When the bombs fall, the light inside the shelter trembles. Dust dances in the candle glow like exhausted snow. Someone recites a prayer halfway through, stops, and finishes it silently. Afterwards, the air is filled with flakes of paper, fragments of yesterday's newspapers, advertisements for concerts that never happened. They drift through streets like lost ideas, landing gently on helmets and ruins alike. The last bridge north. Retreat is not defeat. It's an act of care, for what still lives, for what might rebuild. Orders come in curt sentences. Evacuate civilians. Destroy munitions. Do not look back. Trains stand ready, steam pluming against the night like the breath of some reluctant animal. Families board with what they can carry. Quilts, icons, dogs that will not stop shaking. A woman holds a child wrapped so tightly in wool you can't see its face. A soldier lifts their suitcase, nods, and walks away without waiting for thanks. You stand by the bridge as the last convoy crosses. Behind you, fires bloom in warehouses, controlled, deliberate, erasing what cannot be surrendered. Ahead, the road stretches north under an indifferent moon. Snow begins again, soft and absolute, each flake a signature on the end of a chapter. You look back once, not for sentiment, but for certainty. The city still burns, but it burns with dignity. Flames move slowly, like old music. Then you turn, and the wind erases the footprints almost instantly. The river remembers. Days later, the front contracts toward Viipuri's outskirts. Those who stayed behind fight room by room, street by street. The river freezes and unfreezes within hours, caught between seasons and loyalties. A sniper's report reads, "Enemy crossing at dawn. Visibility poor. Shot echoed too long." He doesn't mention the smell of wet stone, the way smoke curls from rifle barrels like memory leaving the body. The river reflects everything. Fire, aurora, faces leaning over its banks. You kneel, scoop water into your gloved hand. It freezes before you can drink. Somewhere a gramophone plays a scratched record, Sibelius, maybe, or something older. The notes bend, break, resume. You think, this is how countries sound when they refuse to vanish. By evening, Viipuri is no longer a possession, but a promise postponed. The flag comes down, folded without ceremony. Someone writes in a notebook, "We will return when the lakes melt." No one answers, but everyone hears it. What endures? March arrives, hesitant, grey around the edges. The war begins to shift toward negotiation. Men still dig, still freeze, still shoot, but the rhythm changes. You can feel it in the pauses. Longer now, almost hopeful. The soldiers sleep deeper. The radio reports smaller numbers. A kettle whistles without being drowned by artillery. You step outside one morning and realize the sun feels heavier, as if it's remembering its old job. Snow drips from eaves in slow applause. In a field not far from Viipuri's ruins, a patrol finds a frozen photograph, a wedding, summer long gone. The bride's smile has blurred in the ice. They place it on a stump, salute, and move on. Even loss, properly remembered, becomes form of possession. The city will change hands, the maps will redraw, but the story underneath will not move. It will stay here, in the frost, in the way wind still moves carefully over the ruins. Night comes earlier again, but it no longer feels like an ending. It feels like the breath before a new kind of silence. You stand facing north, listening to the wind across the lake. It sounds like pages turning. Chapter 6. Negotiations in Ice. The pause that wasn't peace. The guns didn't stop. They only learned to hesitate. At the front, soldiers notice it first. The longer silences between shells, the uncertain intervals between patrols. The air itself feels undecided. Somewhere behind the line, rumors begin to move faster than orders. You sit in a dugout, stirring tea made from melted snow. The flame beneath the tin cup whispers in blue. Someone says, "They're talking in Stockholm." Another replies, "They've been talking since Christmas." No one laughs. Outside, frost etches patterns on the rifle barrels, delicate as handwriting. The horizon glows faintly with aurora or artillery. It's hard to tell now. There is no such thing as a quiet front. There is only the illusion of one. Every soldier knows, while words are spoken elsewhere, the ice here still listens for footsteps. Smoke, Coffee and maps. In Stockholm, the air smells of civility: cigars, wool coats, strong coffee. Delegations arrive wrapped in the etiquette of exhaustion. Finland's envoys carry notebooks filled with numbers, promises, and unspoken grief. Across the table, men with polished shoes study papers that smell of ink and distance. Outside the window, snow falls softly on neutral ground. Inside, the temperature feels political. They speak in tones designed to hide fatigue. Every phrase begins with regrettable or unavoidable. A secretary pours coffee and listens to history condense into clauses. Someone adjusts a tie while explaining the geometry of surrender disguised as compromise. Another clears his throat, murmurs about strategic depth, as if kilometers of forest and frozen lakes could be summarized into a paragraph. A translator hesitates. There are no words in any language for what men feel when they are trading pieces of their country to stop the bleeding. At the table's edge, a Finnish delegate scribbles a note to himself. Every centimeter has a name. He folds it into his pocket. No one sees. The waiting trenches. Far away, the soldiers wait for peace the way frost waits for dawn, patient, doubtful. Each rumor arrives slower than the cold. Someone says the war will end soon. Someone else shrugs. So will winter. They patch roofs, boil snow, clean rifles already clean. They pretend the silence means safety, though every silence they've known has been followed by sound. In one trench, a corporal reads a newspaper weeks out of date. The headline says negotiations continue. He laughs once, quietly. Continue where? Not here. A message runner brings hot soup from the field kitchen. It's thin but warm. The corporal raises his cup toward the forest and toasts nothing in particular. Steam rises, vanishing into air too cold to remember it. At night, they still post guards. They still write letters. They still wake to the sound of ice cracking like distant gunfire. Peace has not arrived, only its rehearsal. Telegrams and terms. Back in Stockholm, pens begin to move faster. The words on paper are exact, formal, stripped of adjectives. Each sentence begins with shall. Each line erases another town, another stretch of road, another forest where someone once learned to ski. The room is warm, too warm. Men remove gloves, then jackets, then illusions. No one mentions the soldiers still buried under snow, or the families waiting beside unlit stoves. A telegram from Helsinki arrives. The city endures. Civil morale steady. Bombings continue. It is read aloud, nodded at, placed neatly aside. Outside, the clock tower strikes. The sound seems louder than usual, as if the city itself is listening to what it should not. When the final draft lies on the table, no one speaks. One man signs with a steady hand. Another pauses, then writes his name anyway. Paper accepts the ink without argument. History never refuses a signature. The train home. The delegation boards a night train back toward Finland. The carriages are dimly lit. The windows frost over almost instantly. No one removes their coats. Cigarettes burn quietly in the dark, one after another. Outside, the snow passes by like static, endless, directionless. Someone murmurs, "We've saved lives." Another answers, "We've sold land." The silence after that feels heavier than motion. At dawn, the train crosses into familiar country. Towns slide past, half empty, half rebuilt, all quieter than memory. In one station, a woman waves a handkerchief, though she doesn't know who's inside. Her gesture is the kind of forgiveness no treaty can draft. The men inside the carriage don't wave back. They sit, each with his own map folded like gilt in his pocket. The front learns the news. It's mid-March when the message finally reaches the trenches. A captain reads from a slip of paper smudged with fingerprints. Ceasefire to begin at 11 a.m. The men stare, not reacting. One asks, "Today?" The captain nods. "Today." Someone laughs. Not joy, just disbelief breaking its shell. Someone else weeps without sound. They stay at their posts, rifles ready, because habit outlives orders. When the hour arrives, the front goes still. No artillery, no small arms fire, only wind. You hear boots shift, coughs, a bird somewhere testing the air. Then, gradually, the new sound of nothing spreads across kilometers. Not absence, but release. The men remove helmets, stand taller, look around as if expecting the landscape to change color. It doesn't. The snow remains the same white it has always been, impartial and infinite. One soldier lights a cigarette and says, "We did not win." Another replies, "We did not die." Both statements are true enough for history. What words cannot undo. By evening, the ceasefire is complete. The front becomes a museum of steam and breath. Men walk openly across no man's land, trading cigarettes, shaking hands, staring too long at faces they were taught to hate. A Soviet officer offers a flask. A Finnish sergeant accepts. They drink, gnawed, part ways without ceremony. The war has ended, but not the winter. You walk among them, hearing languages mingle like thawing rivers. The air smells of smoke, cordite, sweat, and beginning again. Somewhere, someone hums a tune. Finlandia, faint but unbroken. It rises into the pale sky, meets the aurora, and lingers there like an unfinished promise. In Helsinki, church bells ring, hesitant, uncertain whether to celebrate or mourn. In the north, wolves answer, because they always have. The war has ended. The snow has not. Chapter 7. The Spring That Never Came. The Long Way Home. The war ends without applause. No parades, no speeches, just orders folded into pockets and boots turning north. Men walk home along roads that no longer recognize them. The snow is thinning now, melting in patterns like veins on old hands. Rivers groan beneath ice that has outstayed its welcome. Somewhere, a raven circles low, its shadow moving faster than the men below. You follow them, skis slung over shoulders, rifles quiet, eyes unsure of what to look for. At every bend, they pass wrecks frozen mid-motion, burnt trucks, shattered sledges, helmets half buried in thaw. The war lingers as debris. Villages emerge from smoke and frost, half alive, half rumor. Windows patched with cardboard. Dogs that bark once, then remember. A church steeple tilted like a man leaning into wind. At a crossroads, a signpost leans, its arrows melted into anonymity. Someone jokes softly, even directions deserted. No one laughs. The march continues. Behind them, the silence walks too. The rooms they return to. Houses that survived are colder than they should be. Doors open with sounds like apologies. Inside, the air smells of damp wood, ash, and absence. A soldier hangs his coat by the stove, though the stove is broken. He touches a chair and remembers its previous weight. Someone sitting, sewing, talking. He sets his rifle in the corner, where a broom used to stand. Neighbors visit in pairs. They bring bread, silence, sometimes questions. Who made it? Who didn't? They speak of repairs, of roofs and fences, but avoid names. Names are fragile currency. You spend them only when you must. Children peek from doorways, unsure whether to smile. The men smile back, awkward, mechanical, grateful and frightened all at once. When night comes, the houses breathe in the quiet again. The walls seem to exhale slowly, remembering voices. Somewhere nearby, a cow bellows, the sound echoing across empty fields. It feels like the earth testing its lungs. The missing. Lists begin to circulate. They arrive by courier, by rumor, by priest, typed on thin paper that wrinkles like skin in cold. Families unfold them carefully. Each name is a fuse. Some ignite tears, others disbelief, some only silence. A woman traces a name with her thumb until the ink fades. Another refuses to read at all, saying, "He'll walk through that door when it's time." You see photographs pinned to church doors, faces smiling at the camera, never at the future. Next to them, candles gutter in the wind. In a corner of the churchyard, a soldier kneels beside a mound of snow marked with a cross made of birch twigs. He whispers something you can't hear. The wind carries the syllables anyway. The priest says the ground is too frozen for proper graves. He says spring will come, and with it, the earth will open. You look around and think, the earth has already opened, it just hasn't closed again. The thaw that refused. March ends, but winter doesn't. The sun climbs higher, but its warmth feels like memory pretending. Lakes soften around the edges, but refuse to break. The forests drip quietly, branches shaking off icicles like unwanted memories. Mud appears, then freezes again overnight, like hesitation made visible. Farmers return to fields that smell of iron and smoke. They find shrapnel instead of stones. The plows drag up shell fragments, buttons, sometimes bones. Each discovery slows the work, as if the soil insists on conversation before forgiveness. In the cities, scaffolds rise. Men patch holes in facades while women scrub soot from walls. The rhythm of brushes, hammers, and buckets becomes a new kind of music. Children play in courtyards again, their laughter thin but real. Every sound seems miraculous, even those that remind you of what's gone. At night, frost still creeps in through window cracks, delicate and determined. It sketches its signature on glass, winter's refusal to leave quietly. The faces in the glass. Every mirror tells a story no one wants to read. Men stare at themselves as if meeting a stranger. The lines around their eyes are deeper, the color of skin grayer, the silence behind their faces heavier. One man lifts his hand to his reflection and says, "So you made it too." The mirror fogs from his breath. When it clears, he looks older again. In hospitals, the wounded learn new definitions of time. Days measured by dressing changes, nights by the rhythm of morphine. A nurse hums lullabies to grown men who weep without embarrassment. They dream of trees instead of trenches, but always wake in the same bed. A doctor writes in a ledger. Healing proceeds. Morale low. He closes the book as if to keep the words warm. You pass through the wards and feel gratitude and guilt share the same heartbeat. The living envy the certainty of the dead envy the warmth of the living. No one says it, but everyone feels it. Peace can wound differently. The music of what remains. By April, birds return, thin, tentative notes breaking the monotone sky. Their songs sound wrong at first, too light for the heaviness below. Then, gradually, they fit. In Helsinki, the church bells ring at noon. People stop in the street, unsure whether to bow or smile. Some do both. On the radio, the newsreader's voice trembles. Reconstruction begins. The words sound rehearsed, but the air around them feels honest. At night, musicians gather in a cafe with boarded windows. A piano still works, though a few keys stick. They play Finlandia. No one sings. The melody alone is enough. You sit in the corner, eyes closed, and feel something small but insistent stir inside you. Not joy, not relief, but a rhythm. Maybe it's hope, testing its voice again. Outside, the first real thaw begins. Water drips steadily from roofs, marking time like a metronome. The streets smell of wet wood and ashes, an old grief beginning to soften. But when you look to the horizon, the snow still holds the higher ground. Winter hasn't left. It has only paused to listen. And you understand the truth. Spring will come, but not yet. Not for everyone. Not for everything. Chapter 8. The Quiet Defiance. The hammers begin. Morning arrives earlier now. The light no longer hides. It leans against the ruins as if inspecting its own work. In towns and villages, the sound of hammers replaces gunfire. Wood knocks wood, nails bite grain, roofs rise like slow breaths. Every swing feels deliberate, almost ceremonial. Men build with gloves still patched from war. Women pass them planks, buckets, bread. Children watch from fences, the smell of sawdust replacing that of smoke. No speeches, no flags, only rhythm. Even silence seems to step aside to make room for progress. You walk down a street where every wall wears a new scar. Someone has painted over bullet holes with pale blue. Someone else has left them untouched. Reminders, punctuation marks in a sentence too long to rewrite. The baker's sign hangs again. The forge glows orange. In the square, a clock that stopped in December ticks once, hesitates, and decides to continue. The city exhales. Not loudly, but long. Letters returned. By summer, the post boxes overflow. Letters that never found their readers make the journey home. Each one is a time capsule from a season that refused to melt. A woman opens an envelope postmarked January. Inside, a note, a pressed pine needle, a promise. She reads it twice, then places it on the windowsill beside a cup of thawed snow. At the office, clerks sort the backlog in near silence. Every paper sounds like a heartbeat when unfolded. Ink has blurred in some, tears or rain, no one asks. You help an old man read his son's last line. He nods slowly, says, he writes as if tomorrow still existed. You answer, perhaps it still does. Later, walking home, you realize that survival itself is a form of correspondence. The living writing back to the dead with every sunrise. The Museum of Memory. Near the edge of town, a new building rises, modest and square. It will be called a museum, though it feels more like a chapel. Inside, glass cases hold relics of endurance. A white camouflage suit, still smelling faintly of pine. A frozen diary, thawed just enough to reveal the word Sisu. A tin cup dented by luck. Visitors move slowly, hats in hand. No guards, no velvet ropes, just distance maintained by respect. A mother stands before a photograph of her son. The label reads simply, Karelian Front, 1940. She touches the glass, leaves a print that fogs, fades, and disappears. At closing time, the caretaker dims the lamps one by one. In the half-dark, the relics look alive again, ready to step back into snow. History here doesn't shout. It breathes. The border rewritten. Along the new frontier, surveyors stake lines through wilderness. Maps have changed. Hearts have not. You stand by a border post newly painted red and white. On one side, Finnish pines. On the other, the same pines. Only the silence knows the difference. Families displaced from Karelia build new homes farther west. They arrive with sleds, oxen, and memories too heavy to lift. They plant gardens first, because roots are the only rebellion that never needs permission. A man from Viipuri carves a sign for his new barn, home too. He smiles at the absurdity, then leaves it there. When asked if he misses the old one, he replies, "Every day. That's why I keep building." The wind moves through the border forests like a messenger unsure which side to favor. At dusk, the trees hum softly, as if rehearsing the anthem of a divided land that still sings in unison. Children of the cold. A new generation learns winter differently. For them, it's not a war. It's the story told beside stoves while the snow thickens outside. In schools rebuilt from barracks, teachers trace maps on blackboards, their chalk leaving white scars that look suspiciously like the old front line. The children listen, fidget, then ask, "Did the snow really stop tanks?" The teacher smiles. Sometimes, but mostly, courage did. They recite poems about frost and light, about forests that fought without weapons. During recess, they throw snowballs at invisible enemies and laugh. Their laughter reaches corners of the world still learning to heal. In the evenings, mothers mend mittens by candlelight. Fathers sharpen skis. Outside, the sky shimmers with green aurora, quieter now, as if watching over them. A nation begins to grow again, root by root, breath by breath. The sound of tomorrow. By autumn, the forests have found their color again. Gold, rust, fire, all the shades that winter stole and finally returned. You walk a road once used by convoys. Now it carries school children, bicycles, and trucks of lumber. Every passing wheel erases a little more of the old fear. At a bridge rebuilt from the bones of the last one, an old sergeant fishes alone. He says, "I caught nothing yesterday, nothing today, but I'll try tomorrow." His patience feels like strategy. In Helsinki, a symphony hall reopens. The conductor lifts his baton. The audience holds its breath. When the first note sounds, it feels like Thor underfoot. The music rises, not triumphant, not mournful, just steady. You realize this is what survival sounds like when it learns melody again. And above the city, the evening sky glows the same pale blue as that first camouflage cloth, stitched in kitchens 5 winters ago. A color that never stopped meaning endurance. Chapter 9. The Echo and the North. The snow that remembered. Years pass. The war settles into memory, but the land does not forget. On certain mornings, when fog drifts low across the lakes, you can almost hear it, the muted clatter of unseen skis, the click of a rifle bolt, the whisper of a command that never made it into books. Fishermen on the Karelian border say the ice breathes in March. Old soldiers nod and reply, "So did we." Every winter, the first snowfall arrives with ceremony. Children run to the windows. Elders fall silent. For them, snow is not weather. It's a visitation. Each flake a page returned from an unfinished story. You walk along the tree line where the trenches once ran. There is nothing left now but moss and a few rusted nails. A birch has grown through what used to be a bunker roof. Its bark curls where concrete once held heat. You place your hand on it and feel the faint hum of continuity. The forest is doing what humans rarely can, forgiving without forgetting. The faces of time. In Helsinki, veterans gather once a year at the monument on Mannerheimintie. They stand straight despite their canes. Their coats are heavy, medals pinned like punctuation. Each face holds both pride and disbelief, that they are still here, and that the world went on. A band plays softly, brass, low, respectful. The national flag ripples in slow motion, its blue cross pale against the sky. You see a young boy beside his grandfather. The old man's hand rests on a wooden cane, the boy's on his sleeve. The boy whispers, "Was it cold?" The man answers, "Colder than silence." Wreaths are laid, speeches given, brief, dignified. A priest reads from Psalms, but the congregation seems to pray in another language, the silent one shared by those who have seen things words cannot translate. After the ceremony, they gather at a café near the esplanade. Steam fogs the windows, laughter returns in fragments. Stories begin, drift, circle back. Someone says, "We fought for a winter, and it gave us a century." No one disagrees. North of memory. Far beyond the cities, the wilderness has kept its distance from clocks. Up here, the lakes are mirrors for sky. The mountains hoard their snow like secrets. A reindeer herder finds an old helmet thawed from peat. He washes it in the river, sets it on a rock, and leaves it there. He says later, "The earth wanted it back above ground." Archaeologists sometimes come in summer, walking carefully among the lichen. They find buttons, bullets, sometimes bones. Each discovery handled as if still warm. At night, under the aurora, campfires glow against the dark. The northern lights unfurl like silk banners, green, white, violet. They move soundlessly, a celestial reenactment of courage and cold. You sit beside the fire and feel the heat on one side of your face, the chill on the other. That's how history feels too, warmth and frost sharing the same breath. The letters kept, the words not sent. In attics across Finland, old boxes sleep under dust. Inside, photographs, ration books, field notes, maps drawn on cigarette paper. But the letters are what matter. Some are written in pencil that has nearly vanished. Some are sealed but never sent. One reads, "We can see the northern lights tonight. They look like home finding us again." A granddaughter unfolds it 70 years later, reads it aloud to an empty room, then places it beside a candle. The flame dances, illuminating the handwriting, the pauses, the human distance crossed by time. She doesn't cry. She smiles, softly, as if realizing that the past isn't gone, only quieter. Outside, the wind moves through pines exactly as it did in 1940. The difference is only in the ears that listen. The new silence. Modern Finland hums, trams, laptops, turbines, the low electric sigh of comfort. But beneath that hum lies the old rhythm, patience, endurance, restraint. The war has become part of the country's pulse, not its wound. You stand on a bridge overlooking Helsinki harbour. The air is clean, the water dark and calm. A ferry horn sounds, deep and resonant, echoing between buildings that have long since healed. Somewhere nearby, students gather in a cafe to study history. They talk about geopolitics, strategy, numbers. They do not know that the man sweeping snow outside once carried a rifle along the Rate Road. He moves slowly, deliberately, his shovel scraping the pavement in a rhythm older than he is. You realize, survival isn't an event. It's a posture, a way of standing in wind without asking it to stop. The aurora returns. In Lapland, winter comes early and stays politely. The lakes harden again, the reindeer dig through snow for lichen, the world folds back into white. One night, the aurora ignites the sky. Green at first, then gold, then violet, the same colors that once burned above frozen battlefields. You stand beneath it, alone but not lonely. The air tastes of pine and memory. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, one note, perfectly round. The light ripples across the horizon like breath under glass. For a moment, it feels like the past answering. You whisper to no one in particular, "We are still here." And for once, the wind doesn't take the words away. It carries them forward, through the trees, across the frozen lakes, over the graves and the cities, until they vanish into the dark where stories rest. The echo that remains. Decades have erased the noise, but not the resonance. The Winter War lives now in songs, in museums, in the national habit of understatement. It lives in every porch light left on during snowstorms, in every pair of hands that builds instead of breaks. You think of those who never returned, and those who returned but never really arrived. You think of the word sisu, still untranslatable, still the truest description of how the human spirit endures when it has no reason to. If you listen closely, you can hear it even now, not in gunfire or engines, but in the heartbeat of a nation that once stood barefoot in the snow and said, "Enough." The echo lingers, low and endless, woven into the timbre of the North itself. The rivers carry it, the birches hum it, the wind keeps it in tune. And when the first snow of each year begins to fall, it feels like a curtain closing, not on defeat, but on a lesson fully learned, that small nations can hold enormous silences, and that sometimes silence is the loudest form of defiance. The aurora bends, fades, returns to darkness. You close your eyes. The last sound is the snow itself, falling without hurry, each flake another note in the longest song ever sung. Epilogue: The quiet that outlived the war. Morning returns to Finland in tones of silver and ash. The snowfields gleam faintly under a sky that seems older than before. You stand on a rise above a lake, and the horizon looks the same as it did 80 winters ago, a white silence without conclusion. The war is long gone now, folded into archives and anniversaries, but the air still remembers. You feel it in the texture of cold, in the weight of stillness between gusts. Every breath here tastes faintly of history, not as pain, but as presence, something invisible that refuses to leave because it has nowhere else to go. You walk along the frozen shore. Under your boots, the ice hums softly, like a living thing dreaming beneath sleep. Somewhere beyond the trees, an axe rings, deliberate and slow. It's not war anymore. It's work, continuation, the ordinary heroism of survival. A house stands near the edge of the forest. Its walls are new, its foundation old. Smoke rises from the chimney, thin as memory. Through the window, you see a woman stirring a pot, a child laughing, a man repairing a sled. The firelight flickers against the glass, tiny fragments of the same flame that once burned on battlefields, now teaching warmth instead of warning. This is what victory looks like when it forgets to call itself by name. You move on. The landscape opens, lakes stitched together by forest, forest stitched to sky. Somewhere deep within it lies everything that was lost, names without graves, graves without names, prayers that froze before reaching their destination. Yet the land has absorbed them all, folded them into its rhythm, the way a melody hides inside silence after the last note fades. You stop by a birch scarred by shrapnel. It's wound long since healed into a dark knot. The bark gleams white, indifferent, eternal. You touch it, and it feels warm from the sun. Nature doesn't remember the way humans do. It doesn't replay. It rewrites. The wind shifts, and you hear something faint. Not gunfire, not engines, but a hum. The sound of a world resuming its slow, patient song. In towns and cities, life has long since reclaimed its tempo. The baker kneads dough before dawn. The ferries move across the harbor with a calm born of repetition. Trains whistle through the night, carrying timber, grain, and the quiet conviction that tomorrow exists. Every church bell that rings now does so for routine, not alarm. Every radio that crackles speaks of weather, not war. And every face in every tram window is proof that the human story did not end. It simply changed seasons. You pass through a cemetery dusted with snow. Rows of white crosses lean slightly under their winter coats. Someone has left a sprig of pine on one, tied with blue ribbon. On another, a single candle flickers, refusing to die in the wind. The flame bends but does not go out. You realize it's always been that way, the bending, not the breaking. That's what the war taught, what the silence carried, what the generations kept. Endurance doesn't shout. It whispers, and its echo lasts longer than the sound of any gun. As the day fades, the sky begins to glow, soft, green, living light unfurling from the north. The aurora returns, stretching across the night like a curtain parting for remembrance. Its movement is slow, deliberate, almost human. The same lights once witnessed soldiers standing in snow, breath clouding, hearts refusing surrender. Now they shimmer above a land at peace, their color gentler, their purpose fulfilled. You tilt your head back and breathe in the cold. It tastes like nothing and everything. Pine smoke, iron, salt, forgiveness. Time itself feels thin here. If you listen closely enough, you can almost hear their voices layered beneath the wind. Not words, but tone. The rhythm of those who built fire in frost, who carried silence like armor, who looked at the impossible and said, "We will endure." You close your eyes. The aurora moves overhead, quiet as breath. The lake below mirrors it, a second sky trembling in water. This, finally, is the end of winter, not when snow melts, but when memory softens. The dead are not gone, they've merely changed address. They live in the calm of every sunrise, in the discipline of patience, in the hush that follows each snowfall. The war is over. The silence remains, vast, tender, unbreakable. And if you stand still enough, you can hear it speaking, softly, in the oldest language there is. We were here. We held the line. We became the land. Aftermath. The silence that holds the north. Spring does not hurry here. It arrives the way trust does, slowly, cautiously, unsure its welcome. The snow withdraws 1 inch at a time, revealing earth that still holds the memory of boots and fire. You walk across it carefully, as though it might remember too loudly. The forest stands as it did before the war, patient, unjudging, tall enough to keep secrets. But something in the air has changed. It feels heavier now, as if even the wind has learned reverence. The trenches are shallow furrows in the thawing ground, filled with water the color of pewter. The dugouts have collapsed into themselves, roofs sagging under last winter's stubbornness. You find a single glove half buried in the mud, its leather stiff, its story unfinished. A spent casing glints near a pine root, small enough to be mistaken for nothing, large enough to contain everything. The war has passed, but the land hasn't forgotten its shape. It never does. They called it the Winter War, a brief, brutal contest between vastness and resolve. A handful of months when the world looked away, assuming small nations could not endure large storms. And yet they did. Because the Finns, when pressed, discovered a kind of stillness that could fight, a patience sharpened into will, a quiet that could cut. You stand now in that same quiet. The lakes are still rimmed with ice, the color of dull glass. Somewhere a raven calls once and is answered by nothing, a sound that feels almost ceremonial. The air tastes faintly of smoke and pine resin. You breathe it in and feel the cold settle in your lungs, not as pain, but as clarity. What remains of the war fits into small things. A dented mess tin. A torn page from a field manual, words blurred by meltwater. A name carved into the stock of a rifle, letters trembling where the hand that wrote them froze. History often celebrates victory, but up here, survival was the only triumph that mattered. To endure was to win. You imagine the men who fought here, the skiers ghosting through white forests, their breath visible in the dark, the medics wrapping bandages with hands cracked from cold, the lookouts counting seconds between artillery shells and snowflakes. Most were farmers, students, hunters. Few had seen war before. None would forget it after. They fought not for conquest, but for distance, for the right to decide how far silence could stretch before it broke. When the guns finally stopped, no one cheered. The snow kept falling. The forest absorbed the noise the way it absorbs everything. And when the soldiers went home, those who still could, they carried the war with them in the small rituals of peacetime, chopping wood, boiling coffee, mending fences. Work that was ordinary, but never simple again. You can still feel it now if you listen, the echo of their discipline in the rhythm of a saw, the scrape of a shovel, the steady breath of someone refusing to give up. That is the legacy of this place. Not monuments or speeches, but motion continued past exhaustion. The understanding that endurance is its own language, and that silence, when held properly, can speak louder than sound. The light fades later now. The horizon stretches wide, its edges softened by dusk. Somewhere across the lake, a single cabin window glows. You imagine a fire burning inside, the hiss of melting snow on logs, the small sigh of heat meeting cold. The kind of peace that is not relief, but acknowledgement, a peace earned one frozen heartbeat at a time. The wind returns, gentler this time. It moves through the trees without hurry, touching bark, snow, water, all the things that outlasted the noise. And in its movement, you hear it again, that deep northern truth that strength does not need to shout. It simply holds. You look once more across the white field, now dim with twilight. There is no sound now but your breath and the far-off cracking of ice as the river begins to wake. It is enough, because in that sound you can hear the land remembering and forgiving. Thank you for listening. You've been part of Echoes of War, where stories rise on quiet wings, and the past still circles above us, refusing to land.